Welcome to FitFarm, a show dedicated to creating a better life through fitness and the grappling arts. I'm Joseph Aronson.
I'm Jackie Baker. It's time to get jacked.
What's up, everybody? I am here today with Jim McDonald from the Less Than Obvious podcast. Jim, how you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Nice. Thank you for coming on. I'm really glad we got the technology thing sorted out.
Technology is always the devil is in the details kind of situation.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I mean, if we could we give everybody just a quick intro about yourself? I mean, kind of, what you do now and what you do with the podcast and everything too, and then we'll rewind and kind of talk about where you came from.
What I'm doing right now, I actually launched a new podcast a couple of weeks ago called the Less Than Obvious podcast, and basically what I had observed over working on another show for 250 episodes and doing a couple of other interviews along the way is that I was completely fascinated by the decisions that people made that were really only obvious to them. Why, a lot of them are education related, career related, something like that. But decisions that just are not obvious to everybody else, why someone would go that direction. So I want to talk to people about why they make those decisions and the outcomes of those decisions, either good or bad, and just kind of lessons learned. I think that it's a topic that a lot of people can benefit from, and so that's the direction I decided to go.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes it's a topic that gets glazed over too, where people don't think about, what were you thinking in this exact moment when you made this decision that, totally didn't make sense to me or anyone else, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
And I was inspired by a number of different shows and just in other things. Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point book really made me think about this kind of thing. With Tipping Point, it's more things that you wouldn't necessarily see. They're less than obvious, but they're not reasons for decisions. They're just reasons why things happen. And then a couple of others, the less than what is it called? Hilarious World of Depression podcast has a similar format in which there's an interview and then the host actually jumps in at various points to break down a particular an idea that's been discussed or to give some background or whatever, to give the show an additional structure, I guess, on top of the interview itself.
Right. That's interesting. That's kind of like you said, that's a point of view that I don't think a lot of people are touching on. So it is something that is somewhat missing. I like that you're doing that. What got you originally started into podcasting? I mean, so years ago when you first started.
My first experience with listening to podcasts was really quite a while ago. We'd gotten a dog, we'd gotten a puppy, and she had a whole lot of energy, and it was necessary to walk her actually a couple of times a day, nice long walks. Otherwise she was just impossible to deal with. So I discovered podcasts, and the only way to get them at the time was to hook your iPod up to iTunes and download them to your iPod. And the one I listened to all the time was essentially, basically DVD commentary from the showrunner and creator of the most recent version of Battlestar Galactica. His name is Ron Moore. And he would sit with the episodes on in the background, and he would talk about things that were going on. You were supposed to be kind of synced up and watching him at the same time, but I had already seen the episodes, and so I was able to imagine what he was talking about. And he would sit there with a glass of scotch and maybe smoke a cigarette or whatever, and he would discuss, which scotch and which cigarettes, and there might be somebody sitting with him, his wife or whatever. And he would just talk about background on the episode and all that kind of thing. And I thought, well, that's actually kind of fascinating. I was always into DVD commentary when that was a big deal anyway. And it just sparked my imagination. And in the back of my head, I thought I would like to do something relative to a podcast at some point.
Yeah, and that's huge now. You got the guys that are doing the video game commentary, and I mean commentary on top of commentary. You know, it's huge now, right?
Right. Yeah. And my initial majors in college, I went to 5 schools undergraduate, and I changed my major a lot. But my initial majors were either like radio production, audio production, and film. And then at some point, I took a year off, and when I went back, I just got a business degree. It was a lot simpler, and I got another business degree. And I had really not dealt with media at all for a long time. And then the opportunity came up when I became involved in powerlifting to start shooting it, and then eventually produced probably the first commentary videos that are on YouTube of powerlifting. They were original one was posted in maybe 2007. Like, if there's another one before that, I don't know which one. I don't know who did it. I don't know what it is. So it sort of reignited that spark I had about shooting media and audio, video, all that stuff.
What drove you to the powerlifting world? I mean, you competed yourself too, right?
Yeah, I did. I actually hadn't been involved at all in powerlifting until I was over 40. I lifted, but it wasn't serious, and I wasn't trying to accomplish anything in particular with it. And back in those days, I was on the forums for T-Nation.
I remember that. Yeah, okay.
And I actually met a lot of people through those forums and another site that sort of branched off of there back then in the early 2000s. People who are actually pretty well known in the industry right now. And I made contact with Jesse Burdick, was someone who lived, an hour and a half or so away from me. And he invited me to come to see a powerlifting meet that was in Sacramento, where I live. And so that was early 2004. And I went, and I was completely fascinated just by the effort behind it that people put into it and sort of the emotion on people's faces. And I thought, well, this would make really compelling video. And eventually I did start to shoot some of that. And I was invited to come and lift at a powerlifting gym that's in the Bay Area. So like an hour and 15-minute drive one way. And I did that for about a year and a half. And then Mark Bell started up Super Training, and I was one of the first members there and started shooting video pretty early on. And the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, I mean, you were in ground level there pretty much, right? You were right, one of the guys that was right in the beginning, weren't you?
Yeah, I was actually as one of the first members. And when I say members, I was sort of members of the team. There was no gym in the beginning. We were working out in the back of a commercial gym.
Oh, right. So you had your little group, right, that huddled up. All right, we're gonna do this today, right, sort of thing, or
right. That's pretty much what it was, and it was it was kind of a West Side spinoff program that we were using at the time, and not strict West Side, I would say, but pretty close. And powerlifting will eat your life if you let it, and I certainly did at that point. But like I said, I was over 40. I was consulting at the time. I had a couple different corporate jobs in the past. I was stay-at-home dad for a while particularly for my older son, who had developed a chronic headache problem that lasted for a long time. So he was kind of in and out of school, and my wife had a very well-established job, so it made more sense for her to be involved in work and producing the majority of income, while I did, hung with my kid and took care of household stuff and consulted.
Okay. You seem like you get very passionate about what you do, and you kind of go all in. Is that what happened with powerlifting too? Then you kind of just went all in when you were doing that, and then when you stopped, you went all in with podcasting. I mean, it seems like you just, I don't know, at least in my observation, it seems like you kind of go all in when you're into something, right?
I do go all in. What happened with powerlifting is I just got to the point where, because I started when I was so old that I broke down kind of fast, I guess is what I'm saying. I had hamstring problems, I had shoulder problems, one thing or another, and it got to the point where continuing to compete wasn't the way to go. So I continued to train in that style, but excuse me. continued to train in that style, but I didn't for a long time. But I didn't have any eye on competing anymore. But I think I competed maybe once or twice after the podcast started.
Okay. Did you study any exercise science then, or anything of that nature too? Then, when you got real serious about it, or
I don't have any of that background at all.
Isn't that's wild? Yeah, because you've been around some of the biggest names in lifting and in the powerlifting world and everything, and I always just assumed that he's smart. He probably did some kind of either certification or something.
It wasn't really necessary because I wasn't trying to train people. I mean, the primary coaching that I've ever done was just teammate coaching.
Yeah,
and a lot of that is technique work, or it's what should I do today? Like how heavy should I go today on this particular exercise or whatever, and you're sort of constantly judging that with the other person, and I don't know. It's not the same thing as programming somebody or coaching them either in person or long distance or whatever over the long haul. I do have a training partner now who is intending to compete in a couple months, and I do a little bit of programming for him. I do a lot of technique stuff. He could also just be doing somebody else's program too, and I could just be watching him. That's also fine. I don't see myself as a coach. I'm not a programmer. I'm not. None of those avenues are open to me, really.
Right. You're just someone that's been around it, and you've been so deep into it that you probably picked up plenty of tricks over the years.
Yeah, I saw things that worked for people. I knew what worked for me, and I think that's the most important thing, really.
Yeah, real life experience is probably going to be more conductive than anything you're going to get out of a book, because you need to go out and apply it actually.
Yeah, this is true. I think as long as people are thinking about what they're doing in terms of their own training and paying attention to the kind of results that they get and how they feel on a day-to-day basis, and not letting outside forces really drive their training. They should be thinking about what they want to do every day when they go into the gym, what they want to accomplish, and what their ultimate goals are. And I feel pretty strongly, this is sort of a side note, but I feel pretty strongly that people shouldn't put their goals up on social media and think that that's going to make them accountable, because I don't think it works that way at all. And studies indicate that it doesn't. Anytime that you publicly state a goal, you release some of the tension associated with trying to achieve it. And if you take that tension off yourself, you are less likely to actually achieve it overall. Ultimately.
I agree. I see a lot of people, a lot of fitness people on social media doing that, and I don't want to get too deep into social media, but there's a lot of good and a lot of bad. Definitely, I can see that all over there. Could we talk a little bit about the Powercast? I'm just kind of curious. 250 episodes. Have you had any guests that stuck out to you? Maybe like the top 3 or so.
I think that probably the most important episode we ever did was the one with Janae Krosleski, formerly Matt, after she was outed as transgender. We had her come out and did a show with her, and I think it went a long way towards helping people accept the situation. Matt was such a macho idol, I guess, and to find out that there was this other side inside of her, as someone who identifies as gender fluid, female, whatever. I think it was probably the most important thing we did. We definitely felt like grown-ups when we were finished with that episode.
A lot of emotion on that one, I imagine, too, right?
Yeah, and this is somebody that Mark and I had known for a long time, and this was not new information to us that this was the case. I just don't think that we understood how involved it was before that, and just how much of a struggle it had been. And so that was a big deal. I think that every time that we had Stan Efforting on was a good thing. We had a very synergistic relationship with Stan. He came into the gym in, I think it was 2009, and then went on to start setting records. And it was not that he spent a ton of time in the gym. It was just, it was just the environment, the coaching, and the gym and Stan were not nearly as well known separately as they came to be together. So there was just a big spike from that. And then after that, having him on the show, the podcast didn't start until 2013. So after that, having him on the show was a big deal. Being able to do a couple shows with Stone Cold was very cool. I've never really been a huge wrestling fan other than when I was a kid and my grandmother was into it. And back then we were talking about not The Rock, but The Rock's dad. But the things that he accomplished in that realm and the fact that he has managed to stay relevant, I can't help but be impressed by. And just as a good guy, just really, really solid, interested in business, interested in technology, interested in social media, just it's very connected.
Yeah, he's got his own podcast now too, right?
Yeah, he's been very successful with it too, because he doesn't have any trouble talking. So that always helps in terms of a podcast.
Stone Cold, is that a persona he has all the time, or the way he acts and carries himself, or is he a little different off the microphone and off the camera?
He sort of slips in and out of it, and when he does, it's kind of tongue in cheek.
Okay.
He will put on the persona to be funny, to intentionally be funny.
I always wonder, because some of those guys, you think they're doing it so much that they just become that person. That's who they are. They identify with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real guy there too, and you can have a real conversation with him. I remember that when we first had him on the show, it was just on Skype, and he, became aware that he had my phone number, and he was going to call me with a technical question. And I was driving somewhere, and my phone rings, and I have his number, and it says, Stone Cold. I was like, crap, I have to pull over and talk. I can't possibly drive and talk to Stone Cold at the same time.
Right. How cool is that too, right? Stone Cold is on your caller ID calling you right now.
Yeah. That was awesome. I particularly I like that. The name I was trying to come up with earlier that was a more recent guest on the show is Dr. Andy Galpin.
Sure.
Probably the smartest and most practical guy in the industry right now. He also has a streak of adventure that most people don't have. Like, he's willing to do things just to do them. And if you were somebody that hung out with him, you would probably end up getting talked into doing all kinds of stuff just for the experience of having done it.
Yeah, just to check it off the list, right? Yep, okay, I did that. Next. There's not even a specific rhyme or reason to it. I just say, I want to do this. Let's do it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that, does cold tubs and heat and different diet variations for whatever reason, and he likes to hike and do all sorts of crazy stuff that not that hiking is crazy, but the way he approaches stuff, it's like, I'm going to do this thing, and it's very infectious. If I hung out with him, I'm sure I would do a lot more outgoing stuff than I normally do.
What was your role in the podcast on the Powercast? I mean, you were still one of the hosts, but did you do a lot behind the scenes too?
I did basically 100% of behind the scenes in terms of production. So it was my idea. I recruited Silent Mike into it, and it taken a while to come up with a format and a group that would actually work. The trick isn't being able to do interviews with people and have those episodes work. The trick is being able to do episodes where you don't have a guest and have it still work. And having Mike in the gym and hanging out with him and doing some video stuff with him for my own channel made me realize that he was probably the guy. He was probably the third person who could pull it off. And so, we started in 2013 as just audio, and that's kind of really what I wanted to do. I didn't really want to do video because I was already doing video. I was doing training video, and it just seemed like nobody would want to watch a podcast.
Yeah.
And and you have a lot more flexibility in terms of an audio podcast for fixing things.
Yes.
And if you take that audio and you throw it onto video, now you're married to what's going on. Unless you have a bunch of B-roll to cover your cuts with or whatever, you're stuck with the way it is. So I really only ever wanted to do video, but at episode 30 we started doing video, so 220 plus episodes of video, which was eventually multi-camera video that I produced 100% of. Yeah.
So how much of your time was spent on the actual episode versus how much of it was spent producing, editing, everything else? I mean,
however long it would take to record it, you could double that time in terms of getting there and getting set up and waiting for people to be available and then breaking things down at the end. And then however much time that was, you could multiply that by maybe 5 or 6 in terms of doing the production, because the individual audio and video versions were done separately. Like I would run out an audio version that was only slightly corrected, and then I would use that to match the video to, and then I would produce an entirely separate audio and entirely separate video version.
Man, so that, I mean, and you were doing at that rate, was it 2 episodes a week or just one?
The last 4 months were 2 episodes a week.
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking
so that
about
was
full-time job, right?
It was in terms of content, it was 100 hours of audio and 100 hours of video last year.
Man, that is.
I don't know anybody else that did that, especially not by themselves.
No, that's a lot of work. I mean, and was that your full-time gig? Were you working anywhere else too on top of that? Or?
No, I was not working anywhere else for the most part. I do a little consulting stuff. I was doing a little bit of consulting stuff, a few times a year, but primarily it was just working on the show.
I gotcha. Okay. I was curious how you take, a podcast like that and you have to, since you're putting that much time into it and there's that many people putting that much effort and time, how do you take that and turn that into a business, monetize that? I mean, because for the people that don't understand, you don't just put a podcast out and checks come in the mail.
No, it's true. You need to be able to cultivate sponsors, and without getting too far into it, I don't think we handled it as well as we should have. I think that there are some things that we should have done at the beginning that would have been helpful, and perhaps the show would still be running today had those things been done. But it did actually make a reasonable amount of money last year, and I made a reasonable amount of money last year. But it was starting to wear, and it was more difficult to do the show with 2 people rather than 3 people when Silent Mike left about a year ago. Okay.
Can you tell me a little bit more, I guess, about the current project? I mean, I know we talked in the beginning, what the premise is. Do you have certain goals that you're trying to achieve with that?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to take a while to really build audience, even though, I'm not anonymous, I guess, in the podcast world, but I'm not. I would say this: the average podcast on the big hosts gets about 150 downloads per episode. That's it.
Wow.
And so I'm obviously aiming a whole lot higher than that, and I'm going higher than that. But I would like to get to it. I don't know, at least a third to a half of what the Powercast was doing. And since it's just me, that would probably be enough in terms of advertising to make that work. I'm working in seasons instead of trying to produce a new episode every week forever.
Yeah.
I'm trying to have a little bit more balance with my life, and this show is very different as opposed to, as I was saying before, as opposed to something that's just recorded from end to end and you throw an intro, outro together and there might be a couple of ads. This episode, every episode has a narrative thread that I'm putting into it, and I'm editing every interview so that it fits format, and just trying to create a situation where people can listen and get more out of it than they would if they just heard the interview by itself or just heard the conversation by itself. And at the same time, creating that sense of companionship that you get from listening to a podcast. So all that is challenging. It's been a learning experience. At the same time, I am improving my production skills. I've been taking a certification course for podcast engineering, and I'm actually working on a couple of other shows. And ultimately, alongside of my own podcast that, like I said, probably seasons forever and probably 10 episodes or so per season, I'd like to work with people who are attempting to start their own podcasts who want to produce really high quality stuff and helping them from the ground up figure out how to position their shows and what kind of content that they should be producing and who they should be talking to, that kind of thing. I really want to, because my background is marketing, I really want to help figure out how best to market these shows.
Well, that makes sense since you've been there, done that, and you've made the mistakes, like you said, you know where you would change things up now. I mean, that's like your perfect calling pretty much. You've got the credentials anyhow. That's a great idea. I mean, what is it that you enjoy the most about this podcasting? Is it just meeting new people or just sharing your stories?
It's I guess the structure of storytelling, I guess. The opportunity to talk to people about their lives, ask them questions that you wouldn't necessarily ask in a normal conversation that other people were overhearing, just in terms of being able to understand their decision-making process, their thought process, whatever. You don't really dive that deep in the course of a casual conversation. And what I've discovered so far is that even if I'm asking very simple questions, I can sometimes get pretty emotional responses. And that I have about 8 episodes in the can at the moment, and need to record a couple more, but there are threads that run through these things, and in ways that I had not expected. So I'm really enjoying seeing how that's coming together. I can make the actual episode production process really challenging for myself. I am working on episode 4, and I thought I was done at 2:00 this morning, and when I woke up later, I thought I'm not. It's not where I want it to be. This is not a good representation of the show. I need to go back and rework some things. And so that's what I've been doing today. And I'm really trying not to be a perfectionist. I'm trying to find where is good enough. But
sounds like it.
but I also know that the beginning of a show is an opportunity.
Yes, it's important.
And you need to be able to put quality together. A lot of the podcast startup sites recommend having 3 or 4 episodes that are sort of pillars of how you want to produce your show, how you expect things to run, and sort of the best practices for your show. And at episode 4, I can't really afford to do that wrong.
Yeah, I agree. It's so funny. I would tell people to listen to the podcast. Now, at the beginning, I wouldn't. I was like, I don't know if I want everyone to hear it. And now what happens is they go on the podcast app, they listen to a couple of the most recent ones that I'm proud of, that I like, but then it'll recommend the pilot episode too, because it had, it always gets the most downloads because it's your first, or
right.
Everyone ends up there at some point. So it'll pop up there after like a great new episode I just recorded I'm proud of, and then I just cringe when I hear they listen to the pilot. Like, man, I wish I could just take that out of there and throw it in the garbage. But whatever, it's there now. It's out in the atmosphere.
Yeah, you can't really pull them back. I know that people tell me all the time that they listen to every single episode. I'm like, wow. Like, I didn't even, thinking back, I didn't even want to listen to every single episode. But
yeah, there are quite a few. I'm just like, oh, what was I doing? What was I thinking? What kind of microphone was that? I mean, just all of it. But yeah. Oh well. One thing I like about it and I know you didn't ask, but I just want to share it with you, is the fact that you get to talk to people and have these long conversations that you don't normally have anymore, because we're in the technology world. There's everywhere you go, someone's on their phone. They're halfway looking at you when you're talking to them, but they're halfway looking down, right?
Right.
So that's one thing I like about it. And then also I get to talk to people that I wouldn't normally get to talk to, or I would have never met, because I would have never met Jim McDonald. I would have never seen you because you're across the country from me. But,
Right.
voila, a podcast. We got to talk, and this is awesome because I get to hear about, stories that I would have never heard, or behind the scenes stuff. And that's kind of one thing that really drives me to keep doing it. I've got, like I said, I had Forsaken Warrior out here, Steve Johnson.
Yeah.
You guys had him on once, right?
Yep. Yeah, I know Steve.
So he lives in Chicago, but he was actually in town here there was a fight card. I don't know if you know, he used to do MMA too, actually.
Yeah, I think I was aware of that.
Yeah, and then he was in town for some fights, and it just worked out that he came out here and hung out and did an episode too, and I would have never met him. If I didn't have a podcast, reaching out to talk to him, I would have never met him unless I'd have gone to the gym, his gym, which is 2 hours away, and I don't really need to do that when I have a gym that's 20 minutes away. So, I mean, so that was it was cool. That's one thing I like about it. I'm sure that was nice to you too. I mean, you got Stone Cold calling you on your phone, dude, and that's from podcasting, right? I mean,
right, exactly. No, it definitely opened a world of people like, and another one that a lot of people get and some people don't get at all was we went to see Gary Vaynerchuk last year in New York and recorded in his office. Some people love the guy. Some people don't know who he is. Some people don't like him at all. I can tell you he's been successful, and I can tell you that he has been successful by just being willing to plow forward all the time.
Yeah, and he comes off like that too. Just say, keep going forward, right?
Right, and that's instructive. That's really not for everybody, but for some people, that's just the message they need to hear.
Yeah, he's very successful. That's amazing too, because like you said, where else would you have met that guy? Where else?
Yeah.
Would you be?
I definitely knew people who knew him, but I didn't. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet him myself. I think the other thing that's really rewarding about podcasting is the number of listeners that you hear from. Especially in this transition time, but not exclusive to this time. I've heard from plenty of people, and they tell you just amazing stories about things that they've accomplished, and they tend to assign that to having been inspired by listening to the podcast.
Yeah,
and while I think that's true, I'm also a big believer in kind of right message, right messenger, right time.
Yep.
And I think you can't engineer those things. I think that you just sort of have to throw things out into the universe and hope that people vibe with them. I think that if you try too hard to construct a message, I think that it will fall flat. I think it will not have the authenticity about it.
Yeah, it's got to happen organically, right? It's got to just happen. I mean, you can't force that. You can't force someone to say, "Hey, listen to me. I've got great information, and trust me." But I like that. I've had people, reach out to me and say they enjoyed hearing something, or I had this girl that's local to me here who's an RN and a holistic nurse, so she sees both sides of medicine.
Uh-huh.
And I've had people tell me like, "Oh my goodness, some of the things she said I tried out and I feel so much better, this and that." Awesome, glad I could help. That's cool. And again, that goes back to something I would have never met, if I didn't do this. So, what would you say? What do you think the future of fitness looks like, since you're so tight into the fitness world, as far as, training and all that? What do you think it looks like? Is it going to go all digital now, or?
That's a really good question. I have a friend, former gym mate, who put together an app for Conjugate. It's a phone app for Conjugate, and nothing's really existed like that before. And so that's a thing. And then when I was talking to Matt Reynolds, who runs Starting Strength online coaching, part of his thing with getting into online coaching the way that he has, it was developing an app that people could put in their lifts and video and get their feedback and have more like real interactive coaching, because not everybody can have a in-person coach. I think that's a big thing. I think in terms of broad strokes, I think that we're going to see more and more of the disintegration of CrossFit training, and I mean that in the best way. I mean, people are going to take the pieces of CrossFit that they like and actually concentrate on those more and more, and not try to do everything in terms of CrossFit. I mean, CrossFit will really just be conditioning more for the average person, Metcons and whatever. And if they want to do Olympic lifting, if they want to do powerlifting, if they want to do something more gymnastics oriented, whatever, they're going to do those things. And if they're using it just purely to stay in shape, that's fine too. I think that, I know that the Open grows every year, but I think that that's just an exercise for a lot of people. I don't think that most people have any thought that they're gonna perform particularly well or even do every single Open workout.
Yeah.
But CrossFit itself has revitalized fitness in the United States.
It has.
And around the world.
Whether it's for the good or bad, it's brought so many more people into fitness, right? I mean,
yeah, there's the 24-hour fitness that my workout partner and I use has turf, it has sleds, it has places to do wall balls, it has all has an Airdyne, has all that stuff that you would find in a CrossFit gym in the corner of 24-hour fitness, which is a very mainstream workout
commercial gym. Yeah,
bumper plates, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the great thing it's done. The only thing I haven't liked is the people that jump in without proper technique is the only complaint I've had. Otherwise, they're pushing a great pace. That I like the group atmosphere. I think especially for newer people, a group atmosphere is important, because what new person wants to walk into the gym all by themselves? That's intimidating.
Yeah, I think maybe some people do. I think that some people would rather just keep it to themselves, and those are the people that maybe have their headphones or earbuds in the entire time that they're in a commercial gym.
Yeah,
and they don't ever talk to anybody. Those are the people. They're lone wolves. They don't need the community aspect. But most people do need the community aspect. Most people, especially to keep coming back. And I think that the sad thing for CrossFit is the fact that people leave CrossFit because of injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And do they keep working out at all? And I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if anybody's done any surveying about what happens to people after they leave CrossFit.
Yeah, that's actually a good point too. I had never really thought too deep about that one. I may have heard of injuries and this and that, but I would hope they would still continue to take care of themselves and exercise. But you said some people get that bad taste in their mouth from a bad experience, and they want to quit completely. And I hope that's not the case for everyone. This is actually a listener question. Someone asked me, what are the majority of people in the fitness industry like? I mean, as a whole, I guess you can't. Not everyone's the same, but I just kind of want to get an idea. Like, you've been to all these different powerlifting meets and here and there. I just kind of want to get an idea if they're all about looks, or if some are actually very down to earth and nice. Or
for the most part, everybody is pretty down to earth and nice. There's a facade for some people, for sure, and a lot of that just comes from insecurity that they'll be seen as less than what they portrayed. And I think that that's true everywhere. I don't think that's specific to fitness at all. It's just that it looks better, I guess. Sure. I mean, it looks more put together.
I got you.
In the fitness world.
We'll put up this fake wall, and I'm the coolest, toughest guy around, and I won't address anybody, right?
Yeah, and I think that stuff is really not for the long haul, because it's so hard to sustain. It's I'm not going to say that it's a lie, but a reason not to lie about things is because it's difficult to remember what you said, and it's difficult to stay consistent. Whereas if you're always telling the truth, then you're always being authentic, And I think that the people who can be authentic, who are not putting on too much of a persona, are the ones that are going to last overall. And I think that the problem with having a persona like that is how difficult it is to maintain. And if, a crack in your armor shows, people are likely to turn on you.
Yeah, now you've been exposed, right?
Right. But I met a lot of cool people, and a lot of people that I consider, good friends. And lately with this transition away from the old show, I've gotten a lot of good messages from people that I was really, really happy to get. Let's say.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, like you said, you probably made lifelong friends from that world. So.
Oh yeah, for sure.
What is? I only have a couple questions left for you here. I know we're running kind of long on time, but what would be the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, wow. I actually used to ask that question for my YouTube channel. I probably did maybe 10, 11 of those. Maybe the best answer I ever got was from Dave Hoff, who'd said that powerlifting is a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that life is a marathon, not a sprint. I think that you have to be able to just sort of ride with the waves and not get too caught up in the short-term downturns, because things usually come back. Usually for every downturn, there's an upswing. So that's probably the best advice that I ever heard anybody give.
I like that. And this is my last question for you, since today is my I have like carb load days. Today's I'm getting my day where I'm eating a bunch of junk food.
Awesome.
I'm curious what your biggest weakness is when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to food.
Probably either ice cream or a Reese's peanut butter cups, sort of any variety of Reese's peanut butter cups. But I love ice cream with chocolate sauce and mixed up with peanut butter, period. Basically the same idea as a Reese's peanut butter cup, but in ice cream form. I could really never ever get enough of that, and so that's what I have to avoid when I'm trying to lose weight and just eating too much, period. But that's my real Achilles heel.
Nice. Yeah, I got to say ice cream for sure, and cheesecake for me, definitely.
Yeah, I can take or leave cheesecake. It just is so dense. I mean, it's delicious, and it kind of depends on how it's put together. Just a regular cheesecake might not do it, but one with cookies and cream, that would probably be, like Oreo style cheesecake. That'd be delicious.
That'd be the end of you. I mean, you eat that, and you're on the couch for the remainder of the evening.
Yep.
You're not going anywhere. So I'm almost done here. I was curious what you had for yourself as far as goals and resolutions for 2018.
Goals and resolutions for 2018.
It doesn't have to be podcast related. It could be, personal life or whatever too.
I think my biggest goal right now is figuring out how to push forward into this new business and this new podcast and stuff and still have balance, because balance is not my strong suit. And in terms of developing both the podcast and this new business, my wife is like, you really need to be able to like travel with me when I want to go someplace, because, she works long stretches, and when she's off, she wants to go somewhere. You need to be able to work reasonable amounts of hours a day, all that stuff, and just have that kind of work-life balance. And so that's what I'm working on. That's something I feel more strongly about now at this point in my life than I ever have. It's just finding that balance, just being able to decompress when it's time to decompress, and managing workload, managing expectations. All those things.
You'd be surprised how many people tell me that's their goal, and it's simple, but it's not easy, to find that balance.
Yeah, especially if you're driven to try to be really good, try to do things that other people aren't doing. All those things take time.
Yep. Yeah, and you can put in 20 hours a day if you felt like it and you wanted to, and
I
still wouldn't be enough, right?
Nope.
Okay, and then the last one is what is your end goal with all of this? Not 2018. I'm just saying long road. What is your end goal with everything?
My end goal with podcasting and everything is just having made, I hate the word content, honestly, or having made shows that had impact on people and that paid for themselves, I guess. That's sort of the end goal of all of it, is to just producing high quality stuff, and high quality enough that people are willing to pay for it.
Okay, yeah, and people feel like you're pretty much creating value. Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to cover while I got you on here, or anyone you wanted to give a shout out to or anything?
Not really, other than my episode for next week is actually Silent Mike and Omar Isaf. From their new podcast. Actually, I did their podcast, an episode of their podcast, and they did mine. A very different conversation that I ever had with Mike before. So I would like people to check that out. I don't know what your release schedule is, but that one's going to go up sometime next week.
Your episode should be available by the time this one releases. So that'll be beautiful. That'll be an interesting one too. It sounds like it'll be a good one.
I can't hear you.
Oh man. Okay. Well, there we go with the technology again, right? Technology, whatever.
Yeah, it's in and out real bad.
Who needs it? Okay, we can close it out here. Jim, I want to say thank you for coming on the show. If anyone's looking for you on Instagram, do you have the handle you can give them?
Yeah, I am at the Jim McD pretty much everywhere on social media, and the podcast is Less Than Obvious everywhere but Twitter, where it's Less Than OBV.
Okay, beautiful. All right, thanks for coming on, Jim. I'll talk to you soon, man.
Well, thanks a lot for having me.